Want to hone your craft as a digital marketer and get expert insights from thought leaders and industry experts? Welcome to the How I Work podcast. I'm your host, Josh Becerra, founder and president of Agurian. Follow us on Twitter at Agurian Tweets or subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great content. Now, here's the episode of the podcast. Hello, everybody. This is Josh Becerra from Agurian. We're filming How I Work. I'm super excited to have Esra Kucukciftci with me today. She is the founder and managing principal of Pricing Innovations. Thanks for being here.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. So when I think of pricing experts, you are like the first person I think of. Can you tell the audience a bit about your story? Like, how does someone get into pricing? Where's the passion come from?
That's right. I mean, my journey to pricing was an indirect one, which I think what every pricing person would tell you. Mm-hmm. It's still not a major emphasis in any of the business curriculum. But I actually started in chemical engineering.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did my time 6-7 years in heavy industry manufacturing in various parts of the country, and about 12 years ago now, I got my MBA here at Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. During that time, I did my internship at Facebook. These were the early days of Facebook.
Cool.
It was really cool to be there at the time.
Yeah.
And that really shifted the trajectory. Like, I was always in tech, but it kind of shifted my trajectory into product and different kind of tech. After MBA, I moved to Seattle, was a senior product manager for Amazon for a short amount of time. And then after I came back, briefly, I did product marketing. So in all of these product roles, there was something missing. A common thread was missing. The product people were figuring out what value to build and how to deliver that, and engineering was developing that value. Sales and marketing was communicating the value, and pricing is where it exchanges hands.
Yeah,
and
how you extract the value.
Exactly. Well, extract, and also, the delivery modes of that even, like how is it going to be realized, needs to be thought through.
Sure.
And so I realized that there was something missing, and it was not generally or commonly understood, and I really wanted to understand that and create some knowledge on that. So I founded Pricing Innovations about 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting to me about pricing is that it really it's the most complete picture of any initiative, any solution, any offering, because you have to understand the value that you're developing, how differentiated it is, what it is solving, how your customers and buyers and users realize that value, where the gaps are in their perception of value. You have to understand your microdynamics, you have to understand your competitors, you have to understand the domain, you have to understand where the future of the domain is going, you have to understand where your customers' domains are going, and you also need to understand your own FinOps, your BizOps, your SalesOps. It's a very powerful truth. If you get it right, it really tells you the full story. Because if people are not willing to pay for the value that you built, you didn't really build it. Right. And it takes. You
didn't build it right. That's for sure.
That's right. Yeah. And it really takes a lot to turn a good product into a good business. So pricing gives you that lens.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's super curious that you said, this isn't stuff that they really cover a lot of in like MBA programs or in school, right? Because I mean, there aren't a lot of pricing experts out there like you, and I think that's kind of, now that hearing you talk about it, it's just man, why don't people focus a little bit more on this? Because in the end, success is determined by whether you get that right or not. You might be successful, I guess. You could potentially be successful at getting some value, but are you maximizing that value? I think that's where the difference really probably is.
That really is. You put it really well.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like you've kind of helped us define pricing a little bit and pricing strategy. Is there anything else? I mean, I heard some of that, but is there anything else that you would say listeners should really be thinking about when, like, as a definition for pricing or pricing strategy?
Right, we get that question so often. I think the most important thing to emphasize or understand is pricing doesn't mean prices, and pricing is not about prices.
Right.
You know, when people, talk about pricing or price testing, it's like, oh, do I charge $39 or $49? That's not what we should think about when we think about pricing.
Okay.
So pricing, at the highest level has three components. A pricing plan has three components. There's pricing structure, pricing model, and then pricing window. The 39 versus 49 is what we call the pricing level.
Okay.
So a pricing plan has three components. The pricing structure determines what value or what feature sets, what benefit sets you're going to offer for home. So it's really about aligning your offering with different types of buyers and users. Mm-hmm. And so your pricing structure determines what the offering is, how it's going to be packaged, structured, and how it's going to be aligned with different types of buyers and users. Pricing model determines your metric in what ways the value is going to be realized.
Okay.
In what ways that value scales.
Okay.
Is it a per user? Is it per usage? Mm-hmm. Is it per service level, times type, like whatever the case may be. And
so I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting this straight. So mm-hmm. The first one is you could say you have your first tier, second tier enterprise. The second is kind of how many seats are available, right, in that. Am I getting that right, or am I?
Yeah.
This is complex, so I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting it right.
So let's dive in. So I think the example that you're going with is a good one. So let's think individual, team, and enterprise as three options, right? And it's so relevant because everybody's all about product-led and enterprise these days. So it's a good one. So the pricing structure would determine how many of those tiers you would have to begin with.
Okay.
And the differences between your individual users, your team users, and enterprise users.
Got it.
One of the things that your pricing structure would do is, for example, you would determine what an individual user needs, how they use it, how much of those benefits they will need, and what needs to happen before they can invite their teams to collaborate so that they can all move into the team plan.
Yep.
The key here is that an individual user shouldn't need to upgrade to the team plan to use more of what they need as an individual.
Right.
And that's one of the mistakes that we see. If you want to use more of this individual plan, upgrade to the team plan. Well, what if the person needs more of the benefits but doesn't need the team features or collaborative features? What if it's a developer who just needs more resources in that individual plan, right?
Yeah.
So your pricing structure determines who needs these benefits differently, how much of them, and the delivery mode of those benefits.
Got it.
If your team uses this solution together collaboratively, the way that they would need the solution is different. So your pricing structure defines those differences between how an individual would need this solution versus how a team would need this solution, and put the fences between those two plans. And in general, we refer to them as caps, fences, and triggers. Caps determine how much or what the entitlements are per each level.
Sure.
Fences determine, what is different between the two and when a person moves from the other or a user moves from the other. Mm-hmm. And then triggers are the features in your platform product solution that actually are surfaced for the behavior to take place.
Got it.
And in digital, nothing happens without a trigger.
Right.
So to wrap the structure bit on towards the enterprise side, so your pricing structure also determines how that scaling happens. The scaling of benefits happens. Moving from individual to team, and then how teams move to an enterprise level usage are all determined by what's included in all of them and how that movement is going to happen. Your pricing model determines the metric of monetization. So if it is individual, team, and enterprise, your first hunch would be, then it's per person. Well, it's not that obvious, actually. It doesn't have to be. It could be usage. It could be, consumption of resources. It could be a metric that goes with one of the features or feature sets. So the pricing model determines how that is going to scale across your plans. And then finally, your pricing windows determines how each of those plans will align with willingness to pay of those users. Like, for example, let's say team plan. There are 5 people teams and there are 500 people teams. How is that going to scale? Is a pricing model question, and finding their willingness to pay for different sizes of teams and how those teams collaborate and how much they benefit from it. All of that is a question for the pricing window. So just to wrap it up, when we say pricing, we're talking about a lot of different things, and the pricing level or price point of an offering usually is the least important bit.
Okay. It is amazing to hear you talk about pricing. Like, again, I come at this from like, wow, maybe we should charge, $10 more. And now I'm understanding like the level of complexity. So when you are like first engaging with a client, or maybe you've finally done like your due diligence, with a client and maybe the industry, are you someone who is an advocate for like testing different strategies? Like, what does testing pricing strategies kind of look like for you?
Yeah. So, you have to test and validate. How else would you know, right? And some of the, pricing mistakes can be fairly public. HubSpot had a major snafu last year. They had to publicly pull back their pricing, which I thought was amazing that they did that publicly.
They recognized
it. Recognized, they said, hey, we messed up, and we're retrieving it back to the old plan, and then we're going to keep working on it, and let's work together, which is the right way of pricing communications, honestly. But some of these pricing mistakes can be fairly public, and you want to avoid that if you can. That's why you want to test it. And the best thing about price testing is that you can test pretty much anything and everything about pricing before writing a single line of code.
Okay.
Because the pricing, you're testing the value, you're testing the perceived value, you're testing how users and buyers, think at the point of decision.
Okay.
So those are the things that you're testing. You're testing their relative thinking in relation to all the other references they're thinking when they're making this decision. So those are the things that you're testing. And you can do that without necessarily having a product. Before having a product, you can test it with concepts. You can test it with mocks.
So is that like focus group kind of testing, or is that like A/B testing? Send part of your traffic to a website, page that says this is how much it costs, and the other half, like, how does that actually look in the real world then?
Thanks for asking that. So, absolutely no on focus groups.
Okay.
Because
people will tell you what you want to hear. Or...
if you believe what people will say they'll do, you'll end up building your own company. Like we say that fairly often. So when you think about how you acquire a solution or try a solution or buy a solution, you don't do that in a group setting. So it makes no sense to introduce that solution to you in a group setting. And you could be influenced by other people's value stories, and then that will shift your thinking. But when it comes to you making that decision, purchase decision, or trial behavior on your own, you're thinking within your own context. So sharing context with others in a testing environment for pricing makes no sense.
Bad idea.
So we don't do that. The other bit that we don't highly recommend, which is probably the most common way of testing prices, is A/B testing.
Okay.
I have so many issues with that. Like I'll just pick two, and I
feel like every entrepreneur I talk to and SaaS marketers are like, hey, let's test this. Like we can do this A/B test stuff. So I want to hear this.
Right. Okay. So one, in most cases, it's flat out illegal to sell the same thing, same thing at different prices randomly, or even worse, selectively. Like, hey, you're a bigger account. let me quote you, in enterprise deals, so much goes into that negotiations. Enterprise deals are significantly more prone to like that kind of pricing exercise. But, what A/B testing, we're not talking that kind. We're literally talking about offering different prices.
Yeah, individual users. Things
and
like that.
Amazon got into big trouble about that. Like, about a decade ago, they were, charging different prices for the same thing, to different people and so on and so forth. So A/B testing, there's that reason. Like there is that public, like every time you come back to a site, if you're being offered like something else, it's just bad customer experience. The other part that I take issue with A/B testing, I think is coming from my engineering background. So, I was, a Lean Sigma engineer for, long years. And when Lean Enterprise borrowed a lot of those productivity and quality fundamentals from manufacturing in Lean, they skipped a step, which is the design of experiments. So they went from all those fundamentals of Lean and skipped entire testing, which is design of experiments, and they landed on A/B testing. A/B testing is something that you use to refine things, not to test things. You already know what you need to know, and you're basically refining it for like literally cherry on top.
Yeah.
Pricing testing or price testing needs to happen in a lot more sophisticated way with a full design of experiment where multiple attributes contribute to your decision and you see the effect of those attributes individually and together.
Okay.
So it's a lot more complex how we make these decisions and purchase decisions, and your testing needs to reflect that. A/B testing tests one attribute at a time, and it limits your learning quite significantly.
Yeah.
So what we advocate for is doing price testing offline and using a quantitative method. It could be a pairwise choice testing, it could be conjoint, it could be discrete choice simulations, it could be max diff. But in all cases, you actually want to understand not only the decision, but also what drives that decision. And only in a more sophisticated quant method you get to do that. A/B testing doesn't really give you enough information about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's all very new information to me. I feel like I've definitely been on the like, hey, we can test that, like A/B test it, and we use data, of course, to help us understand like which of those two things is outperforming. But I do understand that you're like only testing one variable at a time, and that it's more complex than that. So,
very true. Very true. I'll give you an example of how a more sophisticated method works. So conjoint is a good example.
Okay.
So in a conjoint setting, you are first gathering information about that user. Those are usually the determinants of the user type, the segment type, or the benefit stack that a user aligns with or best aligns with. So you're learning a little bit about the user, and then you are exposing the user to these tasks, and there could be anywhere between 10 to 20 tasks. And for every single task, user is making a choice, their best option out of the options that they're presented with. And what this simulates is a real-world decision-making process that we deploy in our heads when we're making this decision. So the way that those tasks are built is every option has different set of features, different set of benefits, different levels of benefits at a price point. So every time you are making a decision, you are making that decision at that price point in relation to all the other options. This is very close to real world decision making for buyers and users. So when you have enough representation, when you have say 100, 150 people, you actually get to test 80 to 150 different things.
Right.
Because of your design of experiment, because of how balanced it is. So not only you're learning a lot more attributes and their levels, you're also learning, you're able to simulate if I do this feature set, who would buy at what percentage? Like you can simulate the adoption levels per user type, per segment, per feature set. So it just gives you this really, really rich way that a market is likely to adopt, or like how that market is going to receive that offering. So it gives you a really clear understanding of who it is for, who it is not for, right? And what is likely to happen for each segment if they were presented these options at this particular price point. And the price point is, always presented as a window, so you can still test within that window, like,
39, 49.
That's right. That's what the A/B test is for, and still you want to do that offline. But you can do that at that point. But like the real simulation of that purchase behavior is a more complex process. It's very similar to testing a full design process rather than like you should treat it like you're testing your design iterations in a more complex and sophisticated way.
Cool. So we've talked about like no to focus groups. Like we've heard your why A/B testing is insufficient when it comes to pricing. Any other like big red flags or mistakes that you see people making when they are doing the testing?
I guess the biggest mistake is testing too late. You know, because what happens is that, hey, we built this feature, we built this product or solution, we're about to go to market, we don't know what to price. Too late. It's what happens is that, and this happened multiple times, with our former clients. When we test, we find out that, perhaps another metric might work better. Like, for example, if you build for per seat usage and you realize that the adoption levels might be a lot higher for usage because, let's say, users use it just cyclical or unpredictable or, or variable for different reasons, right? That is an entire different product backend. Right. That is it. Like the way that you build for per seat versus per usage is your product analytics, your attribution, your metering, your cap spans and triggers. All of those things
have to change.
So it's a full reconfiguration of your stack. You don't want to find that out too late. You actually want to build for that. So I think when the price testing happens is really critical. And we call that monetization first product development, like build what you can monetize, but build in that way. So for example, if you figured out your, metric skills in a certain way, you want to think of your plans and your benefits and your roadmap in that way. One of our clients, this wasn't a pricing testing, this was a full transformation, but so this enterprise software that we worked with a few years ago, they built this amazing new feature, and which enabled them to have single sign-on across, tons of different integrations in an enterprise integration platform setting. But their primary pricing metric up to that point had been per connection. Well, this single sign-on bypassed that entire thing. So, all of a sudden, you have to reconfigure with a different type of metric. What is it? Is it per usage? Is it resource consumption? Is it data packages? Is it streaming? What is it, right? First, you need to figure that out. But they had like 500 pages of help documentation. So this is like major. Like you want to figure that out before you build that feature. You want to anticipate these types of things. So the timing of testing is really, really important. Okay, so timing of testing sounds like it's also like a big important thing to consider. So if you're like we have SaaS entrepreneurs and marketers here as an audience mostly, and so where does like the product market fit like come into the timing of that? It's like, do we need to like really think about pricing before we even get to product market fit? Do we get product market fit and then we do more of our like pricing strategy? Like from a timing perspective, like where do you see pricing being most valuable to engage in this type of testing? Yeah, thanks for that question. That is a really important one. Where we stand is as early as possible. From the concept, because the only way to, so let me say this. Your users and buyers differ more in how they need a benefit, how they buy a benefit, how they utilize, and how much they benefit from it. A lot more so than, any other segmentation criteria, like, per vertical, per company size, per,
Sure.
you name it, right? So you want to figure out what we call value stacks of different users as early as possible.
Got it.
So that bit is really value research. It's not so much like pricing research, but it's value research.
Mm-hmm.
You want to figure out how the value that you're going to deliver aligns with the needs of those different types of users, and then what their value stacks look like and how they're different from one another.
Yeah.
Even if you're let's say you're doing a proof of concept for an individual user, let's say in a product-led setting, even if you're building for one user initially, if your vision is to scale it all the way to enterprise, you want to have an idea about that. I'm not saying that you should know that from the get-go. It usually takes a decade or more to get to an enterprise play, if you ever.
Yeah.
However, you still want to have an idea of how value scales horizontally and vertically. What we mean by horizontal and vertical is horizontal scale is how benefits scale when users' portfolio adoption grows, like from one feature to the other, from one plan to the other. You want to have an articulation of that, and you want to have that in the back of your head so that your roadmap reflects that. Like we were talking about, reconfiguring the whole stack. So you want to know how value scales horizontally. You also want to know how value scales vertically, meaning as you have more users in a single organization and more functions and more business units using the same solution, the way that they're going to need the solution and adopt the solution will be different, and how you will scale for that. And I mean, think of Zoom and Slack, right? Like how they figured this out. And I mean, they're poster childs and everybody talks about them, yes.
Okay.
But like the way that they figured it out was absolutely amazing, like going from that individual value into team value and then enterprise value. And now they're doing amazing things with their developer platforms. So now they really figured it out. They can monetize at so granular levels because now they have, all the like developer tools and such. You can do whatever with their platform. So,
but the reason for that is because it was somewhat like premeditated is probably the wrong word, but like they thought about it. They were thinking about like, where is this going? Where do we want this to go? What do we want this to look like? And let's try to like project that so that we know that we can get there.
That's right. I'm sure they didn't, estimate that would be a pandemic and things would be, scaled at such level. I'm sure responding to emergent growth opportunities like as important as knowing that, but at least the building blocks of your solution is envisioned the right way so that you can keep expanding horizontally and vertically. Yeah. So to answer your question in a really long way, you just want to do it as early as possible, and you don't really need a solution built, to know that. You can do that through value research and early, and then you can build on that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned before, the audience here is a lot of SaaS, and I think there's a lot of different things happening in pricing for software as a service companies right now. So, what do you think is like changed? I guess I'm looking for like, what have you seen in particularly like SaaS pricing that has either changed, or where do you see kind of the future of SaaS pricing going? I think that would be super valuable here.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. What we're seeing in the last couple of years, at least, the changes happening on two ends of the spectrum: the product-led versus enterprise. So people are starting to understand enterprise differently, as they should, because enterprise plays now are ecosystem plays, and that's there's a difference between an enterprise play and an ecosystem play. Okay. And so enterprise play generally is a is a matter of scale, whereas ecosystem is integration and how your solution plays with others. How do you consume other solutions? How do you make sense of them? How do you play with them? And then how do you enhance, other solutions for customers' business process, right? So, making your product stack, technology stack, and your pricing work with how the ecosystem works is a really interesting problem to solve. Yeah. So that is really a big question that most companies are working on. And on the other end of the spectrum, all these enterprise software companies are trying to get into the product-led game, right? Yeah. They're trying to seeing all these successes of small scale and then, growth into enterprise. They're like, oh, we've been missing the down market. Yeah, we've been missing all along. So how can we make our product work for that single developer, for that single user, for that single, engineer, you name it, right? So, those are the two really interesting big shifts that are happening. And again, as we touched on earlier, these are not just how you structure your plan. This is how you structure your business. Yeah. Because when you, one of our clients, created this product-led platform that worked entirely differently, but their sales team, had they didn't know how to sell that, right? And they didn't know when to engage, a user that continues to engage and utilize the solution to sell them the next packet, level or whatever. Next level. And so it's a big business transformation. It's your product backend, it's your sales, it's your, even your FinOps, it's your billing and payments infrastructure. Right. What do you need to move on either direction? So I think those are the things that are really interesting from a pricing perspective in SaaS businesses these days.
Got it. Yeah. And anything around the future, is there anything that's you see coming either in SaaS or just generally from a pricing perspective?
I mean, I think this whole ecosystem idea is a really interesting one because, when we talked about the dependency of product backend on metrics, what if there were dynamic metrics? What if your metrics needed to change depending on which ecosystem you're playing with, right? Yeah. Or playing in. So that's a really interesting one. Usage-based pricing is evolving really fast, and the way that we define usage is changing quite a bit. Okay. The way that we're defining those benefits is changing quite a bit. Another one is, these service businesses, professional service businesses, are increasingly adopting recurring revenue models, and they are really interesting to explore because because service always had been relational, and you benefited for the duration of the service. And when the duration project-based, right? So how can you be a true partner for companies to rely on an ongoing basis? And how do those entitlements change? How does your relationship need to change? Right. How do you serve more proactively? Incorporating technology into your services increasingly so that you can offer those recurring models, so on and so forth. There's a really big shift happening in service industry in terms of adopting recurring revenue models. Everything is turning into, recurring revenue models, and everybody's trying to figure out, from your dentist from your managed services provider, everybody's trying to figure it out. It's really interesting.
Well, at Agurian, we do have recurring revenue model, retainers that are just paid, and really it's about, in the end for us, it's about value. It's not how many hours is this buying us? It's can we demonstrate that there's a positive return on investment and that you're getting value from this?
That's right.
And so that's benefited us and I think our clients in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think you touched on something really, really important, which is somewhat overlooked. There are 4 fundamentals in recurring revenue pricing models. The very first one fundamental is what you just said. Customers continue to pay as they continue to benefit. Sometimes the benefit is not a recurring benefit. as long as the benefit is a recurring benefit, you can actually use a recurring revenue model.
Yeah.
And what's really critical in SaaS is that articulating the value of that benefit. And sometimes customers can't do that on their own. Mm-hmm. And that's why SaaS business models innovated customer success, right? Like they really have people to tell the customer how they benefited, how much they benefited, and what the value is, and continue to, and encourage them to continue to pay for that value, and even make the case for even more value, right? So, you're right. Like we actually have to articulate how much value a customer got from our solution and how they will continue to value if they stick with us.
Right.
In some businesses, in some solutions, and there are these solutions where majority of the benefits happen in the very early stage, like let's say in optimization software.
Yeah.
Right. Once you optimize your process, then you're like, well,
show me
water
something
savings.
New.
Now I optimize my process to save all this like water resource usage, right? Great. Do I keep paying?
Yeah.
Well, so isn't that an interesting question? Like what does your solution need to do so that this benefit is either recurring or maintained or improved or enhanced by, integrating with other parts of the business or process or operation, right?
Yep.
So those are really interesting questions. Or the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. So like really interesting questions to ask of ourselves. But you're right. Like value is the key, and articulating that value often is really important for providers.
Yeah. So we've been talking about like the future, right? The future of pricing. I know you're working on some really cool stuff yourself, and so tell us a little bit about where you see your future and your company's future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there are really a couple of really exciting things that are happening for us as well, speaking of future. So in the past few years, we've been looking at our work, and I mean, basically we're working on creating models where models don't exist, or creating new models where models break. And when we ask that question, we clearly see that there are a lot of spaces, domains, and work that needs new models. And we've been applying some of our work and learning on child welfare system and wellness, well-being, systemic transformations in climate action. Because the climate action cannot happen fast enough.
Yeah.
What models do we need to scale these solutions that we already have? So with systemic injustices, unless the beneficiaries change, these systemic injustices won't change.
Sure.
We need to create new models which shift who benefits from these models.
Right.
So we are really shifting our work into systemic transformations and climate action. And for any of your listeners, whoever is working on these kind of spaces, we're doing all of that work for free, and we are happy to support that kind of work, because it simply cannot happen fast enough. And we're really excited about applying all the things that we learned about creating models that work into spaces that matter, and for which we need solutions really fast.
Yeah, that's amazing and inspiring. Thank you for doing that work. And yeah, if there is anybody out there listening, definitely make sure you're finding Esra.
Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. This has been like an amazing conversation, and I'm sure we could go on for hours and hours about this, but I feel like that's probably what we have time for today. I have one last question, which I ask of all my guests, which is just kind of, you're a very smart person. You must be listening to or reading other very smart people. Can you tell us a little bit about like the podcasts or books that are kind of inspiring you today?
Well, thank you. I geek out on neuroscience a lot.
Okay.
I'm just fascinated by further understanding how we think, how we click, how we play, and so like I feel like once we understand humans, we might have a better shot at understanding how life works a bit better. So I geek out on neuroscience books and podcasts quite a bit, just to keep up to date with the rest of the world. I love Esra Kucukciftci show. I love like his perspective. I like 10% Happier by Dan Harris, and I sometimes listen to Tim Ferriss too. His conversations and the way he asks questions is like really, really smart. I find that really inspiring. Trying to learn from him on that.
Sure.
Those are a few that come to mind.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again for being here. This has been an awesome conversation, but that's going to do it for today. So thanks, Esra.
Thank you so much for having me. Great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the How I Work podcast with Josh Becerra. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe. To learn more about Augurian and for more digital marketing tips and insights, head to augurian.com.